Hello everyone and welcome to the Atlanta Standard Open. I'm Glenn Jones. I'm here with Korey McDuffie.
Hello.
Korey, you're an Atlanta native, as it were, playing a lot of these tournaments. You're playing Naya today.
I am playing Naya. I usually like blue-white decks, but I'm stepping in the opposite direction today for some gate crash cards.
I know that Naya, towards the end of the previous season, was splashing a lot of colors. Like, we started with 3 colors, like Jonathan Jobs' Invitational deck, moved into 4, like my own Vegas deck, and my opponent in that tournament's blue Naya deck as well. And by the end of it, we were just splashing everything. We had people with Sphinx's Revelation, Slaughter Games, the whole shebang. You've returned to a core of just red, green, white.
Yes.
Employing the new Shocklands, which fuel these mana dorks, I imagine.
Yes. If anybody's going to say what the best card is at a gate crash in a nutshell, they'll probably just say the lands. And, you know, this deck obviously gets 2 of the lands, the Stomping Grounds and the Sacred Foundries, which obviously Arbor Elf can untap your Stomping Grounds. So in some ways, it's better than Farseek, which most people are really, really in love with. And this deck can't really afford to play Farseek because I want to play 4 Domri Rade.
Yeah, Domri is... I like him a lot, actually. If you're a fan of Above the Curve, you know that I picked him as like my mythic rare to hit the highest price tag from the set. And I stand by this. He's a 3-mana Planeswalker, can generate a very powerful effect, but I think people were underwhelmed initially and have just started warming to him. What's been your experience?
Well, he's part of the reason why I built the deck pretty much the way it is. As you can see, I play all creatures, all lands, minus this 1 Garruk. And he, you know, assuming you have only a couple creatures in your opening hand and you play him on turn 2 off an elf and you have 30 creatures in your deck, you're more than 50% to draw a card off of him. And the fact that he comes in with 3 loyalty and immediately gets ticked up to 4 makes him Searing Spear proof, makes him a lot of those burn spells that normally you'd just be able to deal with a 3, loyalty Planeswalker. I feel like he's can't be killed, especially if you play him on turn 2.
Yeah, on turn 2 he's big, no creature can effectively attack him down past that point, and in a deck with 30 creatures, obviously, defending him is not very difficult.
Exactly.
I think Lockstone Smiter is probably one of the best ones. Not only is it a brick wall, doesn't die to like anything except Mizium Mortars, but also combos very nicely with his fight effect.
Yes, definitely. Like, Restoration Angel is probably one of the more format-defining cards. It's, it being a 3/4 flash plays a very big role against aggro decks, control decks, because that's flash. And when you have a Lockstone Smiter, you just don't fear Restoration Angel in any way, especially when you can fight it post-combat. Another reason why Domri is really good is the fact that I do have so many creatures. I can actually benefit off fighting some of my things. Like if you ever trade a Thrag Tusk for any creature, like you can kind of control the board a little bit. And the deck doesn't have any removal as it is, so fighting is definitely a big thing.
You've had to make some sacrifices with your spell counts, especially, but in return you get the power of Domri, and you're playing a lot of the cards that made Naya good in the first place, including the ability to like basically turbocharge it with additional mana dorks.
Definitely.
The other gate crash card you've made room for in the main deck, Aurelia, the War Leader.
Now Aurelia, pretty much my worst matchup, which I just lost to in the feature match, is Bant Auras, and it's really hard to race that deck because they kind of just do it better than you. Like, I can open good draws when I like turn 2 a Smiter and turn 4 a Thrag Tusk or something, but generally their draws are more tempo oriented and can beat me really fastly. With Aurelia, if you actually just play Thundermaw and attack for 5, and then next turn play Aurelia, that's 5 + 8 + 8. That's 21 damage, 2-card combo, and Domri Rade can help, get through the mana dorks that normally would just be lands and can help you find the cards themselves. So definitely Aurelia is a lot of damage, and another gate crash card that I think will have a huge impact on Standard as it can make you race, especially Thundermaw Hellkite's just a big game player as it is, so I think Aurelia will... This is like the first week gate crashes around, so people are kind of just like playing Matt Costa's blue-white-red deck from the last Grand Prix and Bant Auras because they've been most successful. And just like I said, I think most people's first impression is the lands are the only thing to come out of gate crash, but I promise you with a little bit of innovation and time, cards like Aurelia and Domri Rade will make their way everywhere. I
think especially this week, 4 toughness creatures that are like really threatening, like Aurelia, Smiter, Thundermaw Hellkite, like those decks have started to lean on Searing Spear for their mono red matchups. Much worse card against a Naya deck like this one.
Definitely.
Down in the lands, you've gone with Gavany Township over Kessig Wolfrun, which is, I think, an unconventional shift from the last format where Kessig Wolfrun was pretty much the clear winner. But obviously, so many more creatures, all these mana guys, I think the Gavany Townships are working out.
Yeah, even with all these mana-fixing dual lands, the mana base can still kind of be rocky some games. Like, if I, Arbor Elf has to have a forest on tap, so like, I can't just count on Cavern of Souls to make him a mana producer like a Ken Avison's Pilgrim. So like that kind of messes with the mana base. The fact that you want to have a turn 1 untapped green source, there's only 4, 8, 11, and 13 if you count the 2 Cavern of Souls. So the mana base is kind of rocky. I feel like in general, Township's probably better in this deck because of how much I just like swarm the board. Like these are like probably like the biggest rolls, the 10 mana fixing.
Sure.
And even with Kessig Wolfrun, I definitely want it in the deck, but I think Gavany Township's just a tad bit more necessary, and is what I went up with instead.
Okay. Speaking of Cavern of Souls, I think that's one of the incentives to playing a heavy creature Naya deck in the first place, especially when you expect a lot of the blue decks. What creature type do you find yourself naming most frequently? Human, as you thought with Pilgrim and Ranger? And
it's usually Angel.
Huntmaster? Angel?
In all honesty, I've found myself to be a little short on red sometimes. I even debated cutting or even adding a land for another red source, because there's definitely been some games where, you know, you can't turn down a hand that has like, you know, turn 2 Loxodon Smite or turn 3 Restoration Angel or something like that. So sometimes I keep red light hands, and naming Angel not only allows my Restoration Angel to be uncounterable, but also fixes my mana for Angel Serenity in this thing to make them a little bit more easier to cast. So I think 2 is actually probably the best number. I don't really want more because you can't interfere with the Domri raid, and Garrick, you know, he's a one-of, so you can't really throw him into the bunch too much, but it definitely affects, you know, having those colorless lands for, you know, some of the spells sometimes. Well,
let's move over to the sideboard where we see spells!
Yeah, spells.
We didn't really have room for spells in the main deck based on our Domri configuration, but in the sideboard, you've got some spells. You have Bonfire of the Damned, which is conventionally a main deck card in Naya, but obviously you had to make some room.
Yep.
Aurelia's Fury, hyped card from Gatecrash.
Yeah.
Triumph of Ferocity, good card in control matchups, and one of the better cards, I think, in Naya in general. A bit of a underwhelming but powerful card, like people don't really realize.
Yeah, certainly.
And then you've got additional creatures, of course, in a Centaur Healer and Sigardi.
Yeah.
So let's first just talk about the bonfires. You obviously had to switch them out of the main deck. What was the point where you realized you needed to make that sacrifice?
Well, first off, I only think Bonfire... I think Bonfire is a little bit better in the last metagame. If this metagame is going to have a lot more blue decks, which Gatecrash may have in store, or even burn decks. Bonfire is not very good against burn decks, so I felt like it was kind of deck sensitive. I definitely boarded in against any deck like mine that has these mana elves. Ben Stark's deck from the Grand Prix that's like a billion mana producers and maybe even Lingering Souls. Those kind of decks I want Bonfire against. But there's some grindy decks, like you were saying, the Naya decks ended up splashing blue and black. You don't want Bonfire against those decks. They're like, you know, big creatures and, you know, kind of win the game off 1 threats. And also, it's, yeah, it's just, I just think it's kind of deck dependent.
Sure. I think that Aurelia's Fury can very much take the place of Bonfire in some of the Naya matchups.
Yeah.
Where you really just want to get through lethal. You don't really care if the creatures live or die.
Yeah.
In a lot of circumstances. So when you're boarding in the spells, do you find yourself having to trim down on Domri, or do you just take the hit?
Sometimes. Like, especially in the first round, I played against the Dark Naya deck, like you said, and I definitely cut a Domri because I boarded in the 3 Triumphs and the 2 Aurelia's Furies. Okay. Aurelia's Fury, against some decks that, like I said, have those one-hitter creatures, like even Angel Serenity, you have to have an out to them. And like I said, Domri Raid, I kind of, you know, he fights or whatever, but he can't fight an Angel Serenity, or even
few things can.
Even only sometimes can you profitably fight a Thundermaw, Hellkite, or Thragtusk. So I like to have Aurelia's Fury. Oh, Olivia was the big game player in round 1, but I definitely like to have cards like that, so I have outs to you know, those kind of cards. Sure. I just don't want to be cold. But Aurelia's Fury is fine against like probably zombies, like, you know, if you're on the play and like have a good, you know, if you draw your Manic Cells and just like ping their board, it's probably fine. Also, I just like to have it against pretty much those Dark Naya decks. Any of those decks that go long and try to play 1-game threats where I can either, you know, fireball them for 10 or, you know, make a profitable, you know, board sweep or something.
Sigarda is a card that's been coming up in the world, I think mostly since the Invitational in Los Angeles.
Yep.
You already said that you principally name Angel with Cavern, so it seems like a very natural fit, especially in the matchups where you're boarding it.
Absolutely. Like, the biggest card, the biggest deck that card's good against is Matt Costa's deck, the blue-white red. Yep. It's kind of hard to deal with it. Like, if you can manage to get a couple, you know, not let them get too ahead, and you just like turbo out of Sigarda, how do they deal with that? I don't even know a single card in their deck.
Verdict is like their only answer, and an Angel by itself just requires a Verdict. So that gives you a lot of time to get ahead of something like Domri.
Definitely. And I think a lot less people are going to be playing Supreme Verdict now that Boros Charm counters that. that wasn't necessarily the reason why I played SCGATL, but other than the fact that it has hexproof. And even round 1, my opponent played a Liliana and had a Tribute to Hunger in his hand, and he ended up just throwing the Tribute to Hunger away because he had to flip his Huntmaster. So like, I don't know, I feel like SCGATL is definitely relevant in that case. But the 5/5 hexproof flyer, the fact it stops Restoration Angel and any of those other things, I really like him.
Sure. All right. Well, you're off to a 1-1 start in the Standard Open, so you've got some rounds to claw back.
Yeah.
But I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you at the top of the standings later.
Excellent. Thank you.